Thanks for staying with us. Time now for Media Watch, which I'm joined by James Creedon. Hi, James.
Good evening.
Right, so just a few days before the 50th anniversary of Algeria's independence from France. Now, that makes it a big topic of discussion in the French media at the moment.
Absolutely. For example, radio stations France Culture, for one, broadcasting all day today from Algiers, the capital of Algeria. So this a couple of days ahead of the 50th anniversary of the Accords of Evian, which were the political agreement that made Algeria independent. A lot of the media are talking about it. So you can see here online their website, France Culture, covering that fully. You've also got, this is on the RFI website, a timeline showing all of the key events. So all of these websites here on France Inter, they're looking at the conscripts in the war. It was actually the last war in which French soldiers were conscripted. So a lot of their tales as well, people who were engaged in torture, etc. So talking about their experiences of that 8-year war.
Because both sides were accused of atrocities, weren't they?
Absolutely. It was a brutal war, and indeed different versions of the story as well. Indeed, what a lot of people are saying, for example, on TV5 Monde here, it's very difficult for historians to actually try to sum up the events of those 8 years because people disagree on it, essentially. If there's so many different versions of the story. And indeed, from 1962, the end of the war, to 1982, it wasn't referred to as a war by the French state. It was referred to as the events, les événements. And it was only in 1999 that a law was passed acknowledging what happened. So it's a very complicated history. And indeed, in Slate Afrique, they talk about how the famous Evian Accords, which are 50 years ago on Monday, it's not really a big event in Algeria at all. So that just goes to show the different ways in which this period in history is remembered. In France, that is the day that marks Algerian independence. For the Algerians, their Independence Day is in the month of July, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and they've got some celebrations scheduled for July.
That's right. So really, this 19th of March date means a lot less to Algerians. And indeed, in Algerian school books, for example, not much is made of this political agreement. For Algerians, what mattered much more were the key military moments when, they overcame the French dominance or the French colonialism in Algeria. So that just goes to show how different the perspectives are. El Watan, just to move on to that, that's an Algerian newspaper. They're talking about how a lot of filmmakers in Algeria are trying to capture the events of the War of Independence. But actually a law was brought in Algeria last year whereby all of these screenplays have to be vetted and checked by the Algerian Ministry of Culture, because they want to make sure that the government, the Front de Libération Nationale, that's the party that's been in power for years, who see themselves as the inheritors of the freedom fighters in the War of Independence, they want to make sure that these films don't contradict the official version of history. Because, of course, history really it always depends on who writes it. And they want to make sure that their version of the story is very much held intact. So There you go. It's complicated.
Yeah, it's a complicated anniversary. Yeah,
absolutely.
Now, another big, well, not nearly as big, but maybe
annual
for
event.
you,
Annual event.
It's St. Patrick's Day this weekend.
And I just thought it was amusing that in Le Monde, just very quickly, they were talking more about the food aspect of things than the beer, which is what most people tend to zone in on for St. Patrick's Day. So they're talking about corned beef and how it is the national dish and how it has its origins more in the New York Irish-American diaspora, where pork was difficult to come by. So the Jewish community provided their salted beef for the Irish Americans back in the 1800s, etc., and it was then exported back to Ireland. So they're talking about the history of corned beef, and of course recipes in there as well. And for more details on that, our own Oliver Farry has a blog talking about all aspects of St. Patrick's Day and its various different, I suppose, paradoxes. So, that's worth checking out on the France 24 website too.
Right. So if anyone wants to get up close and personal with the history of corned beef, I guess we're giving them a chance to do so.
2 articles, exactly.
Very quickly, you leave us with some French political humour.
That's right. Now, the spokesperson, I think we have pictures of him, Pierre Moscovici, he's the spokesperson for François Hollande, socialist candidate in the presidential election. He was trying to plug François Hollande's website today, toushollande.fr, everybody for Hollande.fr, except he said tout sauf Hollande.fr, which is everybody but Hollande. So you don't really want your PR guy saying, check out my candidate's website, everybody but Hollande.fr. It's a bit of one of these Freudian slips that you'd probably regret.
An unfortunate moment of being tongue-tied. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thanks,
James Creedon there, bringing us all the latest French media stories with Media Watch.